They told him the audition line was already full, that America's Got Talent had seen enough dreamers that day, and that he should try again next year. He smiled politely, thanked them, and stepped aside, but inside, something cracked. Because next year didn't exist for him. As he watched the doors close, he whispered a prayer he hadn't said out loud in years: "Lord, if this is my last shot at life, please let it mean something." And before this story ends, before the lights fade and the curtain falls, you'll understand why millions would later say this Filipino Elvis didn't just sing a song, he changed everything. If stories of hope, second chances, and impossible comebacks move you, make sure you like this video and subscribe, because this one will stay with you long after it's over. His name was Mateo Cruz, born in a crowded barangay outside Manila where the houses leaned on each other like tired men after a long day. His father drove a jeepney until his hands ached, his mother sold rice cakes at dawn, and Mateo learned early that dreams were luxuries you carried quietly. But when he was 8 years old, everything changed the night his uncle brought home a battered DVD player and a scratched disc labeled simply, Elvis. The screen flickered, the sound crackled, and then there he was, Elvis Presley, moving like fire, singing like heartbreak itself. Mateo didn't understand the English words, but he felt them. That night, while the rain drummed on their tin roof, Mateo stood barefoot in front of the mirror, holding a hairbrush like a microphone, and for the first time in his life, he felt powerful. As years passed, Mateo's love for Elvis became his secret refuge. By day, he helped his mother at the market, shouting prices over the noise of traffic. By night, he practiced singing softly so the neighbors wouldn't complain. He copied Elvis's voice, his stance, even his shy smile between songs. People laughed when they found out. "Why Elvis?" they asked. "That's old music." Mateo would just smile. He didn't know how to explain that Elvis sounded like hope to him, like a promise that someone from nothing could become something unforgettable. Life, however, doesn't pause for dreams. When Mateo was 19, his father collapsed behind the wheel of his jeepney. The hospital bills came fast, and the diagnosis came faster: heart failure. Mateo dropped out of school and took any job he could find: construction, warehouse work, late-night shifts unloading cargo at the port. His voice grew rough from exhaustion, and his dreams gathered dust. When his father passed away, Mateo stopped singing altogether. It felt wrong to chase applause when his family was still struggling just to breathe. Years later, a new pain arrived, quieter but more cruel. Mateo began coughing blood. At first, he ignored it. Then the fevers came. The diagnosis was tuberculosis, advanced and aggressive. The doctor spoke gently but honestly: treatment would be long, expensive, and uncertain. Mateo nodded, thanked him, and walked out into the sun feeling smaller than he ever had. At 29, he was broke, sick, and invisible. The mirror no longer showed Elvis, it showed a man running out of time. During treatment, Mateo met Lila, a nurse who noticed he hummed while waiting for medication. One day, she asked him to sing. He refused at first, embarrassed by his weakness. But she persisted, and one quiet afternoon, Mateo sang "Can't Help Falling in Love," his voice thin but trembling with emotion. Lila cried. Not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. She told him about AGT, about stories she'd seen of people whose lives changed in minutes. Mateo laughed bitterly. "That's for lucky people," he said. But the seed had been planted. Months later, after selling his motorbike and borrowing money from relatives who barely had enough themselves, Mateo booked a one-way ticket to America. He didn't tell most people he was sick. He didn't tell them this might be goodbye. At the airport, his mother pressed a small wooden cross into his hand and said, "Sing like your life depends on it." Because, in truth, it did. The AGT audition line was longer than Mateo imagined. People with glittering costumes, dancers stretching, singers warming up with voices that sounded effortless. Mateo stood there in a borrowed jacket, his hair slicked back in a quiet homage to Elvis, trying to ignore the ache in his chest. Hours passed. His fever returned. By the time he reached the front, his vision blurred. That's when they told him the line was full. What they didn't see was a man who had already buried his father, his dreams, and almost himself. Mateo sat on the curb outside the theater, head in his hands, and for the first time in years, he cried openly. A production assistant passing by heard him singing softly between sobs, "Elvis again, always Elvis." She stopped. She listened. And something in her expression changed. Inside the theater, the judges expected another impersonator. Another gimmick. But when Mateo walked out, thin, nervous, eyes full of fear and fire, the room quieted. He told them his story in broken English, his hands shaking as he explained that this was his last chance, not just for music, but for meaning. Simon raised an eyebrow. "Why Elvis?" he asked. Mateo swallowed. "Because Elvis sang pain like it was love," he said. "And I know pain." The music began. Mateo closed his eyes. And then he sang. It wasn't just an Elvis impression. It was a confession. Every note carried the weight of hospital nights, empty pockets, and prayers whispered into darkness. The audience leaned forward. One judge covered her mouth. When Mateo hit the final note, there was silence, heavy, sacred, before the room exploded. The standing ovation seemed to lift him off the stage. Tears streamed down his face as he bowed, unsure if his legs could hold him. Yes came easily. But what followed changed everything. Donations poured in after his story aired. Messages from strangers who said his voice gave them courage. A foundation offered to cover his treatment. Mateo didn't win the competition, but he won time. He won life. Today, Mateo still sings Elvis, but he also sings his own songs. He returns to the Philippines often, performing free shows in hospitals, reminding patients that they are more than their diagnoses. He says AGT wasn't about fame, it was about being seen when he felt invisible. So if you're watching this and you feel like you're running out of chances, remember Mateo. Remember that sometimes one song, one moment of courage, is enough to change everything. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us share more stories that remind the world that hope is never out of reach, even when it feels like your last shot at life. The security guard shook his head slowly and said the words Mateo Cruz was terrified of hearing. I'm sorry, sir. Auditions are closed. For a moment, the noise of Los Angeles disappeared. The laughter, the chatter, the hopeful voices behind him, all of it faded into silence. Mateo stood there, clutching a crumpled audition number in his trembling hand, staring at the massive doors of America's Got Talent as if they had just sealed his fate. This wasn't just another missed opportunity. This was his last breath of hope. Mateo swallowed hard, forcing a weak smile, and stepped aside. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. Because deep down, he knew something no one else there knew. This wasn't just his last shot at fame. This was his last shot at life. Before this story ends, you'll understand why the judges cried, why millions around the world held their breath, and why this Filipino Elvis impersonator didn't just sing a song, he rewrote his destiny. And if stories of survival, faith, and impossible comebacks touch your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this deserve to be shared. Mateo Cruz was born in a narrow alley in Quezon City, where the houses were stacked so close together that sunlight had to fight its way in. His childhood soundtrack wasn't lullabies, it was the honking of jeepneys, vendors shouting prices, and neighbors arguing through thin walls. His family had love, but not much else. His father worked 16 hours a day driving a jeepney, his hands permanently rough from the steering wheel. His mother woke before dawn to cook rice cakes she sold on the street, praying each day that they'd sell out. Mateo was a quiet child. He watched more than he spoke. And one evening, when he was 8 years old, his uncle brought home a broken DVD player rescued from a junk shop. Along with it came a scratched disc labeled Elvis Presley, Live. That night, the power flickered, the screen buzzed, and then Elvis appeared, larger than life, confident, electric. Mateo didn't understand the lyrics. But he understood the feeling. Something ignited inside him. From that day on, Elvis became his secret escape. Mateo practiced in front of a cracked mirror, using a hairbrush as a microphone. He copied the voice, the posture, the shy half-smile. While other kids dreamed of basketball or video games, Mateo dreamed of stages and lights. But he never said it out loud. In his world, dreams were fragile things, easily broken. As he grew older, reality tightened its grip. When Mateo was 17, his father began complaining of chest pains. "It's nothing," he said, waving it off. Until one afternoon, the jeepney stopped in the middle of traffic, and his father never got up again. The hospital bills swallowed the family whole. Mateo quit school without ceremony and became the man of the house overnight. He worked construction by day and loaded cargo by night. His voice, once smooth and controlled, grew rough from exhaustion and dust. Elvis faded into the background. Singing felt selfish when survival was the priority. Then came the cough. At first, it was mild. Then it wouldn't stop. Blood followed. Fever. Weight loss. The doctor's expression told Mateo everything before the words came. Tuberculosis. Advanced. Dangerous. Treatment was possible, but expensive. And time was not on his side. During long nights in the clinic, Mateo felt himself disappearing. Friends stopped visiting. Work disappeared. Hope thinned. That's when Lila, a nurse with tired eyes and a gentle voice, noticed him humming quietly while waiting for his medication. She asked him what he was singing. He shrugged. Just old songs. One night, when the ward was quiet, she asked him to sing properly. Mateo hesitated. Then he sang "Love Me Tender." His voice cracked. It wasn't perfect. But it was honest. Lila cried without hiding it. She told him about America's Got Talent. About people who were seen when they thought they were forgotten. Mateo laughed. "That's not for people like me," he said. But the idea wouldn't leave him. Against logic, against fear, against his failing body, Mateo sold what little he had. He borrowed money he couldn't promise to repay. His mother cried at the airport but told him to go. "If you're going to fight," she said, "fight loudly." The flight to America felt unreal. Mateo practiced singing in airport bathrooms, in cheap motel rooms, coughing between verses. By the time he reached the audition line, his body was burning with fever. Then came the rejection at the door. Sitting on the curb outside the theater, Mateo felt everything collapse. He sang quietly, not for anyone else, but for himself. That's when a production assistant heard him. She stopped. She listened. And she made a decision that would change everything. When Mateo finally stepped onto the AGT stage, the judges didn't see a superstar. They saw a thin man in a borrowed jacket, hands shaking, eyes heavy with truth. When he said, "This might be my last chance," the room shifted. The music started. And then magic. Mateo didn't imitate Elvis. He became emotion itself. Every note carried pain, hope, gratitude, and fear. When he finished, there was silence so deep it felt holy. Then the eruption. Tears. Standing ovation. For yes. That moment saved his life. The donations. The treatment. The messages from strangers who said, "Your voice gave me strength." Mateo didn't win AGT, but he won tomorrow. Today, Mateo sings for hospital patients, for struggling dreamers, for anyone who feels invisible. He says Elvis taught him how to sing, but life taught him why. So if you're watching this and you feel like time is running out, remember this story. Remember that sometimes, one song is enough to change everything. And if this story touched your heart, like this video and subscribe to the channel, because hope deserves a stage too.